I think it's super important that we take inventory of how we spend our time quite frequently. And another thing to keep in mind is just because how you've been doing your work is working for you in the past doesn't mean it's still working right now. And I think that's the part, where change is the only constant thing in life.
Hey, welcome to my channel. My name is Christy Yoder, host of the Master Delegator podcast. The Master Delegator podcast is for busy and overwhelmed entrepreneurs who want to learn how to become effective in the area of delegation and learn how to hire great virtual assistants to help them scale their business and have more time and freedom. If you are new to this channel, please consider subscribing and don't forget to click the notification bell so you get notified every time I post a new video. All right, let's get started. Hey, in this podcast episode, I had a chance to talk to Felicia Sanders. She is a business strategist, published author, and entrepreneur. She built a seven-figure business in the midst of COVID while undergoing a difficult personal struggle, so she has made it a mission to help other business owners thrive by helping them double their revenue and accelerate their growth without spending additional dollars on marketing. And in this episode, we talk about the 2080 rule and how you can achieve more by doing less. I learned a lot from this episode. I love everything that Felicia shared, and I'm sure that you are going to find so much value in this episode. So keep tuning in. Hey Felicia, thank you so much for joining me on the show. I am so excited because the topic that we are going to be talking about, the 2080 rule and how to do less and achieve more, it's something that I'm also passionate about. And I'm pretty sure that our listeners are also wanting to learn more about that. Like how can you do less and achieve more? It sounds very confusing and it's like,
Mhm.
how do you do that? So that is something that I also want to learn even more, from you further. And I am currently reading a book from John Maxwell. I don't know if you're familiar with John Maxwell, but
Yes, I love that too.
he's my favorite author, really. And I'm actually gonna go to his conference in Atlanta, Georgia in October, you know,
Oh,
to
nice.
to to watch him speak
Mhm.
and learn more from him. So I that's why I'm so excited about our topic for today. But before we dive in, I want to know your story. Like how did you start your entrepreneurial journey, and just tell us about who you
Yeah.
are.
Yeah. No, thank you for having me today. So, I'm Felicia Sanders, and I'm a travel aficionado, entrepreneur, and a published author. I love to travel, and I'm glad you asked me, like, how did I get started into this? Because my parents would say I actually start traveling when I first like out of the womb.
Yeah, wow.
So I'm originally Indonesian. So my family is all over the world, and I've been blessed with, either visiting relatives or whether it's through work or whether it's through my parents, to be visiting all these different places in the world. Well, what's interesting is sometimes our experiences, including the scary ones, if we're facing them heads on, I found that to be can be life changing. And that's what happened to me, because when I was 9 years old, my dad actually had to go to United States for a year to like brush up his skills and also have a kind of like a destination work study, aka in the Colorado. And we were like literally the only so-called minority in that 5,000 population town, small town, Rangeley in Colorado. So you can imagine, I at the time did not speak a word of English. I did not understand what cat even means. And I remember the horror on my parents' face looking at me like, oh my god, what have we done? Because it's scary, right? Like going through the unknown is scary. And I remember as a kid thinking I couldn't sleep for the last 3 months, probably leading up to the beginning of the school year. And all of these bad things, what if this happened, what if that happens, keep replaying in my head. And long story short is it turns out to be the best. experience of my life, and it was so
Wow.
life changing in the point of view where I now see the unknown as an opportunity for greatness
Wow.
instead of something that you should be fearful of. um, and I think getting out of your comfort zone has always been something that I personally felt like it's almost like an addiction of mine. But
Yeah.
in a good way, because like I feel like when I'm in a routine, that's when I knew like either I have overgrown the environment that I'm in or my goal, whatever it is. But I always try to follow my gut feeling to pursue it. And so in 2018, I kind of had this like 12 plus years of corporate career in the top Fortune 100 company, and I thought, man, I should be happy. I should feel fulfilled. Like I should have all these check boxes, right? That I guess in my upbringing, I was told that I should be happy once I have this A, B, and C. But for whatever reason, like nothing really wrong with that specific situations, but it was just not meant for me. And so I start, kind of going through this soul searching period where I felt like, what am I here? Like, why am I here right now? Like, what is my sole purpose? And I always felt called to having that like freedom, both time and how I want to live my life, and also creating a legacy that's meaningful, not only for me, but also for my kids, for years to come. And the only like thing that keeps popping up in my head was the travel side of things, because a lot of people, because I was blessed to travel to all these places, I tend to provide my tips and just share my stories just because I was so excited to share my stories. And turns out that it was the one thing that actually propelled me to jump so-called to the entrepreneurial side of things. um, and I have to tell you, it hasn't been the easiest, but it is also the most rewarding. And I think um, before leading up to the point of like when is the right time to make that call, right? Because I get asked that all the time. It's like, if I'm not happy where I am, when is the right time to so-called pursue my dream, and I was one of those people that have been kind of stuck in that so-called excuse where I'm like, you know what, when I'm 60, when I'm retired, I'm gonna do this. When I'm when I have this $1 million, I'm gonna do this. When I have like, it's always when. And it took like three unexpected deaths back to back within 6 months to so-called like kind of a slap in the face, so to make sure like it's time is an illusion. I think somebody said that. I think it was Buddha or somebody said like time is an illusion. And from that point on is I try to live my life and create a company or a platform that speaks to the volume of using the quality of the quality of the time that you have, not so much about the quantity of time that you have.
Yeah,
And
because we don't even know how much longer we're gonna live here on Earth. Death
yep,
is not about age. We don't know
correct. Yep.
we don't know
Mhm.
when we're gonna pass,
Right,
and
right.
some other people, they die. I mean, in their parents' womb, after a year, or it's not
Mhm,
about death is not about age. You can't predict your age. So I mean your
mhm.
your death. You can't predict your death. So I love what you said about you know s- quality over quantity.
Yes,
Because if
definitely.
you live your life like this is your last day today, then you will have a quality day because you're gonna spend
Mhm.
your time on things that matters to you the most, or you can spend it with your loved ones. And oh my gosh, I love
Absolutely.
everything you said. We're only recording for 7 minutes, but I have a lot of notes already here. So you said
Mhm,
that you love facing problems head on
mhm,
because it gives you a lot of opportunities, and it helps you grow as a person, personally and professionally. And I also love what you said about using the unknown as an opportunity to grow. So instead of fearing it, you use it to fuel you to achieve your dreams, to achieve your goals. I,
mhm.
I love those. So When did you move to the States?
So interestingly enough, I guess the first time when after I was 9 and we returned back to Indonesia. I moved to Singapore when I was 14, and I basically lived on my own then. And then I moved back to the States when I was, I guess, 17, 18 years old. And I literally threw a dart on the map and said, "That's where I'm going." So I ended up in Missouri because it's in the
Wow.
central. It's in the middle. So if
Yeah,
you ever want to
wow.
play a dart game, let me know.
And be sure that you commit to it. Wherever the dart lands on, you go there.
Yeah,
Be
that's
committed to
true.
it. Yeah.
Really?
Wow.
Yes. It's
So,
it's so true because, like, how many times have we asked for a sign, right? From, whether you believe like God, universe, and then once God give you a sign, you're like, "Are you sure? Let me give like 10 more signs just in case if that's not the case."
yeah, that's so
Yeah.
true. But
Yeah.
I love what you said about, just fulfilling your dreams now instead of thinking about, oh, I'm just going to do it tomorrow when I have a million
Mhm.
dollars already in my bank account. Oh, I'm going to do it when I retire, when I turn 60. You don't even know if you're going to turn 60, right?
Right.
Because you can't really predict death.
Right.
So for 12 years you work for corporate companies,
Mm-hmm.
and now you are an entrepreneur. So
Correct.
what have you learned so far from being an entrepreneur?
Oh gosh, there are so many things. I guess, there and first of all, let me address like the death part because there's something
Mhm.
that just kind of came into my mind. And what I've seen the most, because I was in corporate America for so long, I felt like sometimes death doesn't require losing a heartbeat. There are so many people who are dead inside and they just kind of go with the motion, and you can tell because they have no life. Like when you talk to them, you don't feel there's life within them. And I think that's the danger that I had found myself before I made that leap of faith to pursue my dream, that I was already dead inside. I felt like, I did not do what I'm supposed to do in this planet. And sometimes, I had to kind of omit that limiting beliefs that, just because I've done this for 12 plus years doesn't mean that that's going to dictate my future. So that's like, to answer your question, it's like that's one of the things that I had personally have to let go and learn to accept that my past doesn't define my future, and that it's never too late to pursue your dream. And I was kind of like, in already at the time I was like already in my mid 30s, and I thought, man, like if I pursue my dream, is that a selfish move? Like, what happened if I can't provide for my kids? What happened? And then all these bad things come to mind, and I had to retrain my brain to see it again, going back to your point about like seeing the unknown as an opportunity and being okay with being uncomfortable. I think those are like the two things that I had to learn and not only be okay but actually thrive on and feel
Yeah.
excited about. And to me, like one of the key learning that I had was like, you never know, and I always trust my journey. So whatever it is that you're actually going through right now, even when you cannot see so-called, the gold pile at the end of the rainbow, you have to trust that somehow that rainbow is leading you to the right path. And the path is unique to each person. And that's the other thing
Yes.
that I learned, because in business school, because I took MBA and all this, it only taught you how to, the practical side of things, how the practical side of like running a business, how to create a travel franchise, and how to do this. But it doesn't tell you how to be happy. It doesn't tell you how to define what success means to you personally. But you know and success could look different from me versus what you consider as success. And I think that's the kind of stuff that I had to kind of let go from what I think my success should look like. And when my
Wow.
success looks
Mhm.
different from other people, I don't want my value to be diminished by, just because, for example, I just making this up, just because somebody wants to keep growing their business a certain way, and I want to keep it as a boutique travel, for example, that doesn't mean that somehow that person is better than me and vice versa, right? Because, if you're an SUV and you're trying to compete with a Corvette, you're built for different things. So you can't
Yeah.
compete, and you're not supposed to be running your race, trying to keeping up with the Joneses, so to speak. And
Yeah.
so that was the other
I love
thing.
that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
love that you said that that doesn't even require losing a heartbeat. You know,
mhm.
like, which is very true because some people, they live, I mean, they're alive, but they don't really live their life. So they're
Yep.
not happy and they feel just dead inside because they're not
Mm-hmm.
pursuing, those things that make them feel alive. And I
Right.
also love that you said that we all have unique paths that we go through. What you're going through, Felicia, might not be something that I'm going through right now
Mm-hmm.
because our upbringing, our upbringings are different. Your culture is different. I'm from the Philippines originally, you're from Indonesia originally, although you grew up in the States. Although I'm here in the States now, we have different cultures, we have different
Mm-hmm.
processes on how we do things, how we approach things. So we have different paths that we travel on, and we may meet on one of those
Mm-hmm.
paths, but we're not, all of us are not going to be in the same path because we are so different. And that's
Mm-hmm.
because we are also uniquely created. So
Right.
you have you mentioned earlier, as you were telling your story, that when you were in your mid 30s, and so I was like, okay, mid 30s, so that means how old is she now?
Yeah.
Like, I was like
The
calculating already.
secret
I'm
is
like,
out.
and then you mentioned to me earlier before we started recording that you have two kids, and I was like,
Mhm.
I didn't even know that you have kids because you just look so young, fresh, and
Oh gosh.
thriving.
Thank you.
And it's just, it's very admiring and inspirational to see somebody, knowing, I don't really know how old you are, but you look
Yeah.
younger, and you have two kids, so I feel like that's a blessing,
That,
that you have.
yeah.
Yeah. So, but anyway, I'm gonna segue to our topic now.
Yes,
So
yes, for
you have
sure.
two
Yeah.
kids. So you have
Mm-hmm.
two kids and you own a business.
Mm-hmm.
How do you balance your time?
Yeah, so that's a huge part of why I have to be completely honest with what is important to me and what does success looks to me. Because if you ask my, 10 years ago, my success would look different from what success looks like for me right now. And
Mm-hmm.
to me, success feels like freedom, before we record this podcast, I mentioned that I was able to travel with my kids, and my family to certain destination. And to me, like, travel is not so much about the destination per se, but the journey that you're taking together, right? And the experiences and the memories that you're creating. And honestly, I think that's why I love what I do so much. But to your point, if I'm not careful, the things that actually I'm passionate about and that I love, it can easily be the things that I actually look at it as a job quite easily. As a matter of fact, like, I was so stressed, like, in the beginning of like December to February of this year. As you can tell, like, there's a lot of like COVID changes, right? And I'm in the
Yeah.
travel business, so there were just a lot of like unexpected darts that's throwing at me. And a lot of those things basically force me to work smarter, to look at things, from a different angle. And I had to ask myself, just because I can doesn't mean I should. And I think that's kind of where I start looking at things from like a bigger picture, strategy. So it's almost like if you're the captain of the ship, right? If you're so busy like reeling off, kind of like all the ropes and the sail, and nobody is watching where the ship is going, then you might hit a rock and do a Titanic all over again. And so that's kind of what I actually had looked at in the beginning of like 2022. I felt like it was my time to kind of pause and think about how I want to grow, and not only just grow, but to grow intentionally. And the way that it, that I envision it to be. It's like to be proud of not only like where I'm going, but also to be proud of like how I do it. I think Maya Angelou like said something like that. Success is like not just like doing what you love to do, but like how you actually get there. Something like
Yeah.
that. So I actually had to, and one of my biggest struggle in the past is I try to do it all. And I think it has to do a lot with like my upbringing. I was on my own since I was 14. So I'm used to like relying on my own. And I have this shadow side of me where I felt like if I delegate it to somebody else, they might not do it as good as what I would have. And then it's more of a control issue thing for me, because then I end up like noticing that I actually work double to double check what they are doing. And so it kind of negates that. And so I had to learn how to build that trust with the right people. And when they actually proven that they actually have shown, their quality of work and skills, and I try to kind of like delegate those things to them. um and in addition to that, what I would suggest is the strategy that actually have helped me is, you kind of have to be receptive to feedback. And I think, like school to me came easily, so like it's not easy for me to sometimes hear like negative feedback or something that I don't want to hear. But what I had noticed is, for anybody, both personal or business, if you cannot so-called look at yourself in the mirror, right, then you will never grow. And going back to your point about me being so-called like seems to be happy, I just try to do the right thing, because like I always want to keep my soul young. And what I meant by that is I want to let go of my fear of failure, and I want to let go of seeing, trying new things as like it's a shot to my ego. You know what I mean? I mean, if you look at kids, right, and then you ask them to like, hey, do you know how to do this? Instead of like fearing, oh my god, this person is going to look at me like I don't know what I'm doing, right, they just attack it from a fun mentality. And if they stumble and fall, so what? Like they don't care. Like they just laugh at themselves and move on.
That's so true. Yeah.
And so that's kind of how I try to kind of embody those like kind of like the young energy, not so much about like like trying to be young or anything, but like that childlike wonder. I never want to lose it as an adult. And I want to approach the business and understanding that the clients that I'm helping with, if they don't feel fun working with you, no matter how good of a job you do, they're never going to do business with you again.
Yeah, if you look stressed and overwhelmed while you're talking to them, they're not gonna do business with you. So I
Right.
totally agree that you need to keep your soul young by having
Hmm.
a childlike, wonder or belief, or
Yeah.
attitude.
Right.
I just so love a lot of things that you said. You said that for you success is freedom and that it's not a destination, it's a journey, and I totally agree with that. As I have mentioned, I love John Maxwell, becoming a successful
Yes.
leader not because you want to achieve something, but
Hmm.
you want to learn all throughout your journey as a person. And I also love what you said about getting feedback from
Hmm.
other people even though we don't really like it, because sometimes it's the pride in us that do not want to hear feedback from other people, because we want to be pleasing to all people. We just want to hear all the
Hmm.
good things about us, but we just don't realize that those feedback that we need to hear, those um appropriate feedback, if I may say, those are the things that are going to help you succeed and grow
Hmm.
even more. So I just love everything you said. I feel like,
Right.
if I listen to this interview
Yeah.
after this recording, I'm gonna get a lot of quotable quotes from you. So don't be surprised. Don't be surprised if I post something on Instagram and I'll post something like that. That doesn't require losing a heartbeat. Blah blah blah. Felicia Sanders.
Are you sick and tired of being overwhelmed and afraid you'll never scale your business? Meet Smart VAs. Unlike many virtual assistant agencies that only assign one dedicated virtual assistant, we provide flexibility for growing businesses by assigning a team of experienced virtual assistants that can do different tasks to support your continuous growth. Visit smartvas.online to book a free discovery call and start growing your business.
How how do you make sure that you follow the 2080 rule now, and how do you make sure that you work less and achieve more by doing that? So how do you do it yourself, and how do you think we can do it ourselves as well as an entrepreneur, as entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things, but I would say, I think going back to like, the captain of the ship analogy, I think it's super important that we take inventory of how we spend our time quite frequently. And another thing to keep in mind is just because how you've been doing your work is working for you in the past doesn't mean it's still working right now. And I think that's the part, where change is the only constant thing in life. And so it's really important to kind of maybe like schedule, like every quarter you would, and every quarter you would kind of like take inventory of like, is this ship still going where I think it's going, is the destination, so to speak, is still kind of the destination that you want to pursue. And if it's not, going back to my own personal story of the being in corporate world for 12 months, never look at your past as like, if you don't keep going, then it's a waste, because it's never a waste. And and even now, like, I'm still kind of utilizing some of the skill set that I used to think like, where am I gonna use this skill ever again? And it's like some things that you don't like, some chapters in your life will sometimes remain titleless until like later on in life. And so, what I would suggest is like look up once in a while. Definitely like start your week. I would start my morning usually with like writing like notes. So I have like my notes like always like right next to me, and I would just list like the top 10 things that I want to accomplish today. And then I would look at it and categorize it into like, what are some of those things that I must do and then nice to have. And then I would focus on maybe one or two tasks that not only like that I have to do today, but it's more of a like my passion goal. So it kind of keeps my fuel alive. And in my personal thing, it's usually either like writing or like even like podcasting or connecting with people who have similar passion or like goal or values. Um, and then when you start categorizing them, you start focusing on those tasks and looking at it from the point of view of, out of all these tasks, which one can I delegate and which one, I need to be doing it myself. Like in my personal case, usually like social media and content creation is something that I personally wants to still do no matter how busy I
Yeah.
get, because it's it's my, it's like I want it to be my voice, that's kind of like transferable to that platform. But as far as like so-called the busy work, I try to kind of look at it from like the perspective is like, okay, just because I can doesn't mean I should. And if I created those space to do what I actually am good at or enjoy, oftentimes what happens is not only that creates more flow into your life, both time and money, but it also creates, more space to do what I love to do in the end. And you'll be surprised sometimes how much those like synchronicities and finding the right people who either enjoy doing those busy work or they might need it, and kind of like giving them opportunities to do those things actually helps you to a not be burned out, because nobody is like, you have to put your oxygen mask on before you can help other people. So a lot of business owners sometimes, they work so much that they don't even notice that they're on like oxygen level is very low, and then they wonder why sometimes like their business is not like growing the way, or feel like stuck or whatnot, because your energy, right, is going to be transferable to your anything that you touch, including your business. So if you're not happy with the way it's going, I think it's important to kind of take inventory and remove those tasks that are that's not maybe your passion child, and see if you can delegate it to somebody else, and then so you can do more things that actually is helpful to you. And then what's interesting is, when you craft your time to be better, like I think you mentioned, like you're attending workshops and things like that, so that you can actually hear and learn about different ways, maybe that you can, do things. I think it's so important, going back to like being receptive to feedback and, different ways of working. Because if you're not open to it and you think like, what is the best, then you will never be able to grow outside of your limitation, because that's the world that you created for yourself. But
Yeah.
when we let go of like, okay, just because I've done it this way before, I'm open to, creative way to attack the problem. And I think welcoming those energy in your life will definitely helps propel you to accomplish more with less. So I always
Yeah.
say, sometimes like slow is fast and fast is slow.
That is so true. And I love that you mentioned, it's important that you do the things that you love or the things that you
Mm-hmm.
enjoy,
Mm-hmm.
because those things fills up your soul. It fills your
Yes.
soul with so many good things. And if your soul is dead, you won't be able to function well in your business and even in your personal life. So I really like that you mentioned that. So
Mm-hmm.
when we do less, we can achieve more, because the things that we are only gonna do, when we take inventory of our time and our tasks, knowing what to delegate and what not to delegate, if you only keep 20% of those tasks that you listed, and those 20% are the tasks that fills your soul, the tasks that can give you more revenue or give you more income or profit, it will help you achieve the 80% just by only doing those 20% of the tasks that you want to do. So, and I I have that is a proven and tested concept,
Mm-hmm.
because I am doing that on a
Mm-hmm.
daily basis. I only do my meetings from 8 to 12, because I want to make sure that from 12 to 1
Mm-hmm.
I eat lunch. I want
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that I have time to eat in peace,
Yeah, that's
and not
important.
eat
Yes.
yeah, not eat in front of my laptop or while having meetings. I think that is something that I deserve, to have
Mm-hmm.
to eat my lunch, my food, in peace. 5 p.m. That's my white space. So that's when I do all my admin tasks, and that's when I think about what I need to do for the next couple of days in order to grow my business. So,
Mm-hmm.
and that's how I use my 20% in terms of filling up my calendar. So
Mm-hmm.
from 8 to 12, that's where I schedule all my meetings, and then past 12, that's where I do all the creative thinking that I need to have or to do in order
Mm-hmm.
to be successful. Um, so tell us about
Mm-hmm.
when, because you mentioned earlier that um, when you think of delegation, you think that it's something that will not add value to you immediately, because you gotta find that person that you trust, because you've experienced delegating, and you're double checking the work. So what can you tell entrepreneurs who are not delegating yet? um what can you advise them to do, if they have the same experience that you had? They hired a virtual assistant, but they ended up double checking everything just because they don't have the right person to help them with the business, and they don't trust that person yet. So what can you tell them in order to be successful in the area of delegation?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I think, my advice is, you kind of have to be honest and know what you want. And it seems to be very simple concept, but you'll be surprised sometimes, like, when you ask anyone, sometimes they don't even know what they want, or they think they want what they want. But when you start asking them specific questions about how they foresee their dream life, it's very different from the goals that they actually have for themselves, so for example, like, if you have a goal for freedom, and then somehow the task that you're actually, or the strategy that you created for your business require you to be on daily meetings every single day, how is that going to create, right, like freedom that you foresee if you don't make changes? Which is, in this case, it could be delegation, it could be like maybe focusing on one or two things, or maybe pivoting part of your business so that you don't have to be on those meetings. But I think the point is, the point, like, start zero, like knowing what is important for you, just list them out on a piece of paper. What are those like 3 to 5 things that you absolutely wants to have to be happy? And this is kind of where it can get down to like your level of personal goal. Because when you so-called connect to your own personal mission and goal, that's like when things just kind of you
Yeah.
kind of connect to your inner fire, and then it's the fuel that you need to go through the tough time. And then I think in addition to that is, you also have to focus on, I would say, pick 2 or 3 things that you want to focus at and start with. So don't try to like delegate the whole
You need to
shebang.
start
And
small.
because I know, like, for people
Yeah.
who may not like, start small. Yeah, start baby step, and just start tackling like what are some of those tasks that you either don't like or can delegate to somebody else. Start small and see how that goes, because sometimes it's not so much about the control, but it's like sometimes it's about like finding the right talent to be able to help you. And once you find those talent, and trust, that's kind of where you feel like the relationship is just gonna kind of, organically grow to provide more and more tasks to them, because they're gonna have your back. So I would say start small. And I think this also applies to just like, how do we grow intentionally? Because I actually had this analogy, and it's actually a true story. Somebody just told me yesterday, how do you grow a pumpkin? But then she continues and said, do you know how to grow a bigger
Mhm.
pumpkin? And I'm like, is this a tricky question? I don't know how, because I'm not a planter. But what she said next was very interesting, because she said then you have to kind of keep one pumpkin that's growing and cut the rest. So you're channeling all those energy into that one pumpkin, and that's how you grow a big pumpkin, a huge pumpkin. And isn't that funny though? Because that same concept applies to our life, and what you water will grow. And so if you try to water too many things, not only you will end up burned out, but you most likely will be, cutting yourself, like, so-called too short, because it's you only have a certain amount of time to begin with. So don't I would say, don't try to grow
Mhm.
too fast, because I think a lot of us, in the society, we want instant gratifications. We want, like, how do you get from 0 to 100 as short as possible? And we thought that was like success story, right? Because a lot of people kind of use that. um but if you try to grow intentionally and creating, like, focusing on creating a solid foundations, the rest of it is gonna follow that journey, and you feel like, your house is built on a solid foundation instead of like a sinking sand.
Yeah.
So
I
yep,
love
those
that.
are the few things. Yep.
Yeah, so I love what you said about what you water grows. So you have to
Mm-hmm.
also be intentional about, you know, what you want to grow, and
Right.
you have to know the areas in your business that you want to grow so that you know
Mm-hmm.
what to water daily, right? And sometimes I love using as an example when it comes to business, because when you plant something, like for instance, if you plant zucchini, just like for example, if
Mm-hmm.
you see dead leaves, dead branches, then you're gonna cut those out, so that you, like what you mentioned earlier, you're gonna channel you know nutrients to other leaves or fruits or branches, so that you have a healthy
Right.
plant. And sometimes we and sometimes out,
Right.
because it tends to be painful, and we don't want to waste something, but holding on to those things that are not essential, that are not necessary for us to live or to grow our business, um they're the one they're gonna hold us back from going. So I think we need to learn how to let go, or else we're gonna let go of ourselves, you
Right.
know,
Right. And
because we are gonna neglect a lot of things.
absolutely. And I think, going back to your ask or questions about delegation, right? It's almost like going back to the plant analogy. If you can have somebody else water the plants, and the risk of kind of like overwatering is very tiny, or can be mitigated by saying, you go, okay, this is how much you water every day, and it's a very clear process, and it's repeatable, that you water it every 4 p.m. every day. Then you can focus your energy on planting new seeds somewhere else. And so
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
it's kind of that concept that I try to follow, is because if you try to do it all, you can only grow so much. And if you have a team behind you, not only that, you tend to find yourself in a happier place, but then you can channel your energy to like plant maybe roses, and going back to that
Yeah,
analogy about, like, you have to know what fruit and vegetable. Do you want to plant roses, or do you want to plant vegetable? And not every soil is made for that. So, we just have to be completely honest with what we want, so that we can kind of
that's so
tackle
true.
it. Yep. So,
Amen to that. So we are now gonna wrap up
yeah.
our conversation because I'm gonna go and water my plants.
Ah,
Just
that's a good
kidding.
one. Okay.
Um, but this is your time to tell our listeners what you do.
Yeah, yeah. So again, I love what I do. I own a travel franchise, and I specialize in destinations, wedding, honeymoons, corporate retreats. So if anybody is listening out there who loves to travel as a group, we're kind of in the process of creating theme retreats and workshops overseas. So whether you want to be a participant or a host, you can definitely contact info@campsetc.com. Or you can find me on campsetc website.com. There's a contact form that you can fill out if you want to get in touch with us. Or, the travel franchise that I have is called Trip It Like You Mean It. And it goes back to the concept of time is non refundable, and, live intentionally. So trip it like you mean it.
I
So,
love what you said. Time is non-refundable.
it is. It is. Going back to quality versus quantity.
That's so true. I like that. Well, thank you so
Mhm.
much for joining me today, Felicia. I love everything you said. Oh my gosh, like I'm gonna listen to this episode again. But again, thank you, and let's keep in touch.
Yeah, thanks for having me.